Point north, right now. Don't think about it. Just point. Watch what you did. Maybe your hand drifted up and stopped halfway. Maybe you looked for a window. Maybe you started reasoning. The sun was over there this morning. So that must be, and gave up before you finished. Or maybe you didn't move at all because some part of you already knew there was no answer coming. You're sitting in a room you know completely. You could describe every object in it with your eyes shut, and you cannot say which way is north. That isn't a failure of attention. Hold on to the feeling for a second though, because it's the whole video. You have never been lost. Not really. And you have also never once found your own way. 50 years ago, a man crossed roughly 2,500 miles of open Pacific with no map, no compass, and no instruments of any kind. 31 days at sea. He arrived, not nearby, not eventually. He ended islands scattered in an ocean that is almost entirely not islands, and he hit them. To make that same crossing, you would need a satellite network, a phone, and a charged battery. The canoe was called Hokulea. It left Hawaii on the 1st of May 1976, made landfall in French Polynesia 31 days later, and when it finally reached the harbor at Papeete in Tahiti, more than 17,000 people were standing on the shore waiting for it. The navigator's name was Malpiailu, and he wasn't Hawaiian. He was from Satawal, a small island in Micronesia, and he had been brought across the Pacific to steer a Hawaiian canoe, because by 1976, Hawaiians couldn't do this anymore. The knowledge had gone from Hawaii. Piailuk was one of the last handful of people alive trained in it the old way. Sit with the shape of that for a second because you're going to recognize it before the end. To prove their own ancestors had crossed this ocean deliberately, not drifted, not blown off course, but navigated, they had to bring in the last man who still knew how. The Voyaging Society called it the first crossing of that route without instruments in over 600 years. And here's the part that should bother you, because it's about you and not about them. Humans have always made maps. We have just not always made the one you're picturing, the thing in your pocket. Space, seen from above, drawn to scale, so that a stranger who has never been to a place can be handed it and still get through. That specific object is recent, startlingly recent, and for almost everyone who has ever had to find their way, it simply wasn't there. So what were people actually using? In the Marshall Islands, navigators built charts out of sticks, not sticks standing in for coastlines, sticks standing in for swells. The curved rods showed the way ocean waves bend and rebound when they strike land, and small shells marked where the island sat inside those patterns. An island you cannot see still leaves a signature in the water hundreds of miles out. The chart taught you to feel it, and then here's the detail. That changes what a chart even is. They didn't take them. The chart stayed on land. A navigator built one for himself, studied it, memorized it, and then left it behind and went to sea with all of it inside his head. Many were close to unreadable to anyone but their maker. These weren't documents, they were training equipment for a mind. You still own exactly one map like that. Think about your own home in the dark. 3 in the morning, no lights, eyes barely open. You don't picture a floor plan. You don't consult anything. You're not even properly awake. You just go around the corner, past the thing you keep meaning to move, hand landing on the door frame at exactly the right height. That's not the memory of a picture. That's a route living in a body. It's the last one you got, and it stops at your front door. Now stretch that to an ocean. Micronesian navigators work from a compass made of stars, 32 points around the horizon, fixed by where particular stars rise and set. Winds, currents, swells, reefs, the positions of islands, all of it filed against that one frame. And they use something called etak, which sounds impossible until you sit with it properly. The navigator holds in mind an island he cannot see, somewhere off to the side, and tracks it sliding backwards beneath the star points as the voyage goes on. In etak, the canoe isn't moving. The canoe sits still and the ocean travels past it. Thomas Gladwin and David Lewis both went and sailed with these navigators and wrote down how it worked. It isn't mysticism. It's arithmetic done continuously for a month in your head with nothing written down. Meanwhile, and this is the bit most people have backwards, Europe absolutely had maps. They just weren't for this. Around the year 1300, someone in England finished the Hereford Mappa Mundi, the largest medieval world map that survives, painted onto a single calfskin. Jerusalem sits at the center. Christ sits above the world. And east is at the top, because east is where the sun comes up and where Eden was thought to be. You cannot travel with this. It was never trying to help you travel. It's an argument about what the world means in the shape of a world, That east at the top habit is still in your mouth, by the way. To orient something is to turn it toward the east. Orientation, orienteering. North being up is a decision other people made and you inherited it without being asked. And 10 years before Hereford, a completely different kind of chart already existed. The Carte Bassan around 1290, and this one really did cross water. Coastlines accurate enough to steer by? No known ancestor. It appears in the record fully formed, and historians of cartography still argue about where that accuracy came from. Two traditions running side by side, one arguing about the world, one crossing it. Neither of them the thing in your pocket, because accurate to scale mapping of an entire country doesn't get finished until the 1780s. France begun in 1733, triangle by triangle, the first general map of a whole nation built from actual measurement. That's when the modern map properly arrives. And its defining feature isn't accuracy, it's that it works for someone who has never been there. Read that again because it's the entire invention. Knowing where you are stopped being something you were and became something you could consult. It moved out of the person and onto the surface. And once it was on the surface, it could be copied, sold, carried, handed to a stranger, handed to an army, handed to you, which is an extraordinary deal. Genuinely, you can be dropped into a city you have never seen, in a country whose language you don't speak, and stand at a specific door 20 minutes later. Almost nobody in human history could do anything remotely like that. You just want to be clear about what went the other way. In the year 2000, a neuroscientist named Eleanor Maguire scanned the brains of London taxi drivers. To get licensed in London, you have to pass a test called the Knowledge. Years of study, the city learned by heart, until you can produce any route on demand with no help at all. Maguire found these drivers had measurably larger posterior hippocampus than people who didn't drive taxis. The hippocampus is where spatial memory gets built, and the size tracked how long they've been doing the job. The longer they'd driven, the bigger it was. That points away for people simply being born for the job. The city looks like it was building the structure. Hold on to that, because the obvious question runs the other way, and that one is about you. In 2017, a team led by Amir Homayu Javadi put people in a scanner and had them navigate a simulation of Soho in London. When someone was finding their own way every time they entered a new street, the hippocampus fired, and the size of that response tracked the number of possible routes opening up ahead of them. The brain was standing at the junction, modeling futures. That's your brain at every junction you have ever actually solved. Then they gave the same people turn by turn directions. The signal wasn't there, not reduced, absent. When the route was being handed over one instruction at a time, entering the new street produced nothing because there was nothing to work out. A voice was going to say turn left before the question could even form. Now I want to be careful because this is exactly where videos like this start lying to you. That study shows disengagement. It does not show damage. Your phone is not injuring your brain. There's a follow up from 2020 that found people with more lifetime GPS use did worse on spatial memory when the GPS was taken away, and that the heavier users declined faster over the next 3 years. But the group they retested was 13 people. 13. That's a signal, not a verdict. And anyone telling you this is settled hasn't read it. Here's what can be said honestly: the capacity is still in you, it responds to being used, and you have built a life in which it is almost never used. Think of a drive you've done 100 times. Now draw it, not the turns, the shape. Where does it sit relative to your house? Which direction were you facing when you arrived? Could you still get there if the road you always take were closed? 100 times, and never once without being told how. The wayfinding didn't die, by the way. Pierre-Luc wouldn't allow it. He broke with his own tradition to teach an outsider. He initiated 16 new navigators, and there are people sailing that way today, deliberately, having given decades of their lives to it. So it isn't gone, it just isn't ordinary anymore. That's the part that actually left. It used to be the baseline condition of anyone who went to sea. The normal skill of normal people, now it's a discipline, kept alive by specialists, and you're standing on the far side of that line holding a small bright rectangle that knows exactly where you are. You can find any address on Earth, you could not walk home from 3 towns over. Dimly opens one of these doors every week. Subscribe and stay curious.